I was here a long time ago, but I'm glad to be back. And thanks to all of the sponsoring organizations who brought me here. I'm going to talk this evening about a topic that I consider to be the most important topic that anyone can talk about in the world today, and that is the topic of racism. Racism has a negative impact on the vast majority of people in the world, and everyone of goodwill, whether they classify themselves as black, brown, red, yellow, or white. Everyone who is interested in there being justice in the world so that we can have peace has to have a very deep interest in this topic of racism. Now, I will tell you how I got involved in looking into the topic of racism in a serious way. I am a general psychiatrist and a child psychiatrist. And when I started a residency in general psychiatry at St. Elizabeth's Hospital in Washington, D.C., I realized in working with black patients, I was at a hospital, a very large hospital that was in a federal government hospital, and there were black patients and white patients. And the training program was under the auspices of all black training officers, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts. And unfortunately, the attitude at that time was that black patients were not candidates for psychotherapy because they didn't have the intellect to discuss their emotional life. And so the concept was that, well, the best treatment for these patients is drug medication. Well, I'm a third generation physician in my family. My father was a physician, his father was a physician. And I had been raised in a different tradition, in a different way of looking at the healthcare problems of black people. So as a physician, I was interested in helping all people get well. White people, black people, adults, children, adolescents. But being a black physician, and there being at that time very few black psychiatric physicians, I knew that it was my responsibility to try to understand the issues that were negatively impacting on the lives of black people and causing problems that we refer to as mental illnesses. And in talking to black patients, I realized in taking the history that everybody had a very negative experience with that thing that we call racism. And so I knew I had to find out more about what racism is all about if I am going to be the kind of physician that I want to be. In other words, if you're going to be a good physician, you can be the kind of physician that says, oh, I'll just pass out medication and I'll make a lot of money, and if the people keep coming back with the problem, that's okay. That was not my concept. That if you are a very good physician, you have to be interested in curing problems. And more importantly, you have to be interested in the prevention of the problem. And if you're going to prevent disease of any kind, you have to understand it in depth. When I was an undergrad at Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio, at that time I thought, well, economic dynamics are causing racism. And that was a part of Karl Marx's theory, that the economic process and class struggle was producing racism, and if you divided people up in racial categories, it would be easy to exploit the workers. Well, after reading a great deal in Marxism and attempting to apply it to me from my vantage point, it didn't work. It didn't really compute. It didn't really help solve the problem. So I was still looking for answers. What exactly is this dynamic dynamic of racism. And, you know, if you're other than black, you may not be aware that whenever black people sit down and talk, when they are amongst themselves, the one topic that they discuss is some dimension of racism. Something that has happened on the job, something that has happened in the neighborhood, something that has happened in school, at the university, that is a dimension or a reflection of racism. I guess it's pretty much like if one were to monitor the discussion of Semites of the Jewish religion in Germany prior to or during the course of the Second World War. I'm sure they were always talking about anti-Semitism or what was happening to Jewish people, because it was impacting on a daily basis, 24 hours a day. So that kind of thing goes on amongst black people. So it is a very, very critical and important topic. So I was looking for the answers, reading everything that I could read, get my hands on, thinking about the problem, talking to other people about the problem. In 1967, I had the good fortune to meet a gentleman in the District of Columbia whose name is Levi Fuller Jr. He is not a college professor nor a physician. He was a black gentleman who had started writing about racism when he was a soldier in the Korean War. Black gentleman, he said he was sitting on a radar site in Japan when he started thinking about problems and issues that were going on in the part of the world that we call the United States. And he said that the language that was being used, segregation, desegregation, resegregation, etc., that from that mountaintop, it didn't make any sense. And he said that he started writing about racism. And what he came up with, and I heard him say this for the first time in 1967, he said that racism was a system. He said that the system was global, not just local to this area of the world, that it was all over the world. And unlike Marx saying that economics was causing racism, so we put the big R word over here, said racism is a system, that it is global, and that racism encompasses every single area of people activity. And he broke those areas of activity into 9. Economics, and these are alphabetized so you can remember them. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. He said that racism is practiced in all of these areas of activity. And he said that the reason, now this is the thinking of one individual, he said that the reason that racism is practiced is so that persons who classify themselves as white can maintain control and domination over the people that white people classify as non-white. See, this terminology is not the terminology of people of color. This is the terminology that people of color encounter. White and non-white, and non-white meaning the black, brown, red, and yellow people on planet Earth. So I said, this is very interesting. When I first heard this, sort of like a light bulb clicked in my head. And I said, this seems to be it. I had traveled outside of the United States. And I had never been in a place where there was not racism, meaning white domination. Every place in the world, there is white domination. As a psychiatrist, people come into my office. I have a general practice of general psychiatry and child psychiatry. I've been practicing psychiatry since 1967. People come to the office and ask the psychiatrist, why, doctor, am I feeling this way? Why am I doing this particular thing? So psychiatrists are quite interested in the why behind behavior. Why is behavior structured in the particular pattern that it is structured say, well, this is it. But why? What is the particular causation? That's like in medicine, doctors look for etiology, meaning the cause. What is the cause of this particular thing? So this question floated around in the back of my brain computer. And you don't always have to be in the lab. You know, you can switch on your brain computer. These are very powerful brain computers between everybody's ears. If you give the computer an assignment, and when you raise the question why in a serious way, you're giving your brain computer an assignment, and you're telling your brain computer to gather data, gather information, so that there will be an answer to this question. So I put the why in the back of my brain computer, and I was actually in my kitchen cooking or doing the dishes one day, and the printout came. See, not in a lab looking at a lot of test tubes. But that's one way to get answers, but you can put, as I said, the question in your computer. And the computer might tell you to go to the library, might tell you to do a number of things. But I just thought about this particular question, this particular description of behavior, and begin to bring into view information that I had learned in the course of my education up to that point. And so what my brain computer printed out is this. And this is within the framework of always hearing. See, black people hear, maybe people of color hear. Black people are genetically inferior. How many people in this audience have heard that? I see a lot of people's hands are not up. That means they're not on the planet. Came from another galaxy. See, I came out and was looking up at the stars. You don't see all these stars and you see too much pollution. So maybe there's some people in here who rise from one of those stars who don't know what's happening on planet Earth. That is a very common discussion of black genetic inferiority. And as a psychiatrist, one of the things that I had learned is if somebody keeps saying, Francis, guess what? I'm superior. Did you know that? I'm superior. I am superior. Francis, did you read? I'm superior. The psychiatrist, behavioral scientist knows that when a person, you see, superiority speaks for itself. If a person has to go around reiterating it, means they're nervous inside. They don't really believe it. You see, so that statement, I'm superior, meaning that black is genetically inferior. That's an important thing that the computer printed out. Another thing is that minority, you're a minority. Now, you all are minorities, all you different minorities. That these different minorities are actually what on the planet Earth? The majority. The vast majority of people on planet Earth, 9/10 of the people, if not more, are black, brown, red, and yellow. The minority is white. Okay. So these were distortions. Now, why might there be a distortion? And I said, well, since, 1992 is what? The 500th anniversary of Columbus. Columbus started people in Europe circumnavigating the globe. And I said that what they found out in those little boats after the meeting of the Pinta and the Santa Maria, they found out that every place they landed, it was more colored people. If the gentlemen on those boats, I'll just wait that if the gentlemen on the boats were sexually frustrated, and they waited around 9 months for their boats to be repaired before going back, they realized that if go to a laboratory to find out. What if the men in these different areas, instead of the boats going from north to south, what if these gentlemen got in boats and started going south to north? They realized that there would be the genetic disappearance, or the disappearance of white. Is everybody following me?
Yeah, I think so.
So that the ability to produce skin pigmentation, not by Francis Welsing's system of genetics, but the system of genetics that was taught to Francis Welsing, that black, brown, red, and yellow, the ability to produce the black pigment melanin, is a genetically dominant trait, and the inability to produce skin pigmentation is a genetic recessive trait. Is everybody with me who's studying biology? So I said, this is it. As simple as this sounds, this is it. That the reason that there had to be, after there was circumnavigation of the globe by persons who classified themselves as white, was for purposes of white genetic survival and the prevention of white genetic annihilation. Is everybody following me? See, I didn't know that this was important. I had to learn that this was important. Because under white supremacy, see, black people do not go around worrying about being genetically annihilated. That under white supremacy, black, brown, red, and yellow people have been taught to hate their color. And so they have tried to get rid of their color. You see, can I bleach it out? You see, or maybe dilute it. Can I get a white mate to try to dilute it and get rid of it? You see, that has been the programming under white supremacy. Okay. So I said, oh, I really understand that if people are trying to survive genetically themselves, being a tiny minority of the people on the planet, and being in fear of the genetic power of the majority, even though I do not agree that the behavior should be in this way, I can certainly understand the survival logic of this behavior. So one of the things that I looked at, you see, because black people in this area of the world, and I can go any place where there has been confrontation of color, meaning white people encountering people they classify as non-white, dominating and then teaching the code of white genetic survival. That black people, black children learn before they learn how to read. If you are black, what? Stay back. If you are brown, what? Stay brown. If you're yellow, you're mellow. And if you're white, you're all right. Now I can go to England, doesn't matter where in the world I choose to go. Every people of color in their language has learned this color code after the encounter with white and the domination by white. So I understood that. I also understood that while there was all of the discussion telling black people, you know, you're ugly if you have color, that I learned this when I went to college. The first thing I learned, see, in my class in college, there was one black female student and one black male student per class. That was integration in the 50s. And so they had a drive for more black students coming on campus, and the dean of admissions said, we can't have more black students because some of our girls come here to get married. Now that, didn't make sense. What's the relation? Now I understand. So, but we're back on point. Having come from the south side of Chicago, the first April that I was on campus, I had come back from the cafeteria, and I had jeans on and a jacket. I was still cold, but the sun was out. And I hit the main lawn of the campus, and I saw all these bodies on the campus. People with shorts on. And I actually said, see, it was cultural shock. I hadn't seen that phenomenon. I said, what is this? What are they doing? They were suntanned, right? First rays of sun, suntanning. Now that would be fine, that's okay. But when people on the other side of the track are being taught the more color you have, the uglier you are. And then people going out in the cold get the same color. You see, this is what did not add up. And the people on the black side of the track didn't know that the people on the other side of the track were actually admiring the color. At the same time, they were teaching the people who had the color that they were ugly for having it. You see, now I talked one time at a college in Washington, D.C., 90% white students. And one of the students said, Dr. Wilson, do you know that in the summertime, we compete to see who can get the darkest tan? And the one who can get the darkest tan is elevated to the top of the list. You see, but on the other side, there was simultaneous message being taught, well, you already have color and you're ugly. Now, the critical key is that the very pigment that the suntan produces is the melanin pigment that people of color already have. And not through Francis Welsing's neurochemistry or genetics. You see, but the absence of melanin. See, having melanin is the norm for the human family. The absence of melanin is defined not by Francis Wells. Go to your dermatology textbooks, go to your biology textbooks. The inability for melanocytes to produce melanin is called albinism. It is defined as a genetic deficiency disease, not by Francis Wells. Now, please understand that this discussion is not to cause anyone to feel bad. You see, what we are trying to do is to solve the most critical problem on this planet. So it's not about making anybody feel uncomfortable. But, like I was trained in psychiatry, and it said the psychiatrist's job is to help people face reality even when they think they can't. Even when they're frightened of looking at it. The job of the mental health physician is to help them deal with it. So, suntanning, everybody has cells in their skin called melanocytes. melanocytes, and their job is to produce melanin. If there is an absence of the enzyme tyrosinase in the chain of chemical events, you cannot go from tyrosine to the production of melanin if that particular enzyme is missing. If that enzyme is missing, then the condition will be albinism, meaning white skin. If you bombard melanocytes that have a previous deficiency of tyrosinase, if you bombard them with ultraviolet rays of the sun, you can force them to produce small quantities of tyrosinase, leading to the production of melanin, but at what cost? Cancer, exactly. You see, if you keep bombarding get that tan, there is the unfortunate chance that cancer, skin cancer, can be produced. So that part we cleared up. Going on to what the theory helps us to understand. When I was growing up on the south side of Chicago, I remember distinctly a discussion that was held in my house, mother, father, grandmother, in the dining room, and they had a black newspaper. And they were discussing something in hushed tones. That means the children are not supposed to be listening, but I was listening. And they were talking about a newspaper article where a black man had been lynched. And I remember saying to my grandmother, "Why, Granny, would they do that?" And my grandmother said, "Some people have to act ugly." So that satisfied a young child. But after I understood in later life what the dynamic of racism was fundamentally about, then I said, "Oh, I understand lynching. I understand lynching and the attendant castration that went along with it in all too many cases." What is the logic of lynching and castration if we understand racism? If I say racism is a system of behavior for the purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation, then it stands to reason that this would be attacked on a black man. Does everybody know what this is? Not me. Do I need a model? No, this is male genitalia. This is biology 101, physiology 101. Is everybody with me? Human body, male, okay? Lynching, castration occurring under racism. What is the logic? If there, and lynching and castration very often occurred when a black man was accused of thinking about looking at a white man. Or he thought he wanted to think about looking at it. Now we may make light of it here, but this was critically serious. See, critically serious and tragic. You know, the hunting and tracking of a black man, be he 40, or in the case of Emmett Till, be he 15 years old. You see, who said something to a white adult female, and he was hunted down, you see, and lynched. What's the logic? If the fundamental issue is genetic, white genetic survival, then it stands to reason that the person who is frightened about white genetic survival, if a black man has sexual intercourse with a white female and the product is colored, that would equal white genetic annihilation. And so then if he is killed and then his genitals are attacked, why his genitals? What is in the testicles class? The genetic material, the ability to produce color, and therefore cause white genetic annihilation. Are you with me? And so it occurs, I must attack that. Are you with me, class? So I said, oh, I understand tanning and I understand lynching, castration. And see, once you part the curtains or open the door on understanding this phenomenon of everything that is going on around you that just looks like everyday activity, you begin to see that it fits within the framework divorced at the time, so I wrote it in my dad's name. I didn't name it after my ex-husband so he'll get into more trouble. I said, no, I named it after my family. Press theory was the first statement of understanding white supremacy, my statement of understanding white supremacy. And I presented it at the National Medical Association section on neurology and psychiatry in Atlanta, Georgia in 1970. After that paper came out, basically laying, oh, this is about white genetic survival. Then I started seeing a lot of other phenomena that we see around us that we don't give much weight to, but it is major phenomena within the culture, and I say that white supremacy is a global system, and the culture that comes from that is the white supremacy system and culture. And within that culture, ball games are very important. Now, I don't want anybody who's read the ISIS papers or who's read Francis Russell's papers, ball games as symbols of the white supremacy system and culture. Please don't give other people a chance. I was in my house, it must have been one Sunday afternoon, and it was so quiet. And see, your brain computer, when it's very quiet, the brain computer really works out. And I said, that's why they have some people, this is your soul, say, boom, so you don't quit. So it was so quiet, and I said, what's going on? Why is it so quiet? And then I realized the brain computer said, oh, ball game, Sunday afternoon ball game. The next thing the brain computer said was for it to be so quiet, for this one activity to bring quiet over everything, the ball games must have a significance that we don't yet understand. What is it? So my brain computer, don't ask me how my brain computer just So I said, oh, it's two series of ball games in the white supremacy system and culture. What are the two series? And don't answer if you read it. And I know you won't trick me. See, I said the smartest person in the room. What are the two series of ball games if you haven't read my paper? What are the two series of ball games in the white supremacy system and culture? See, it's something that you're looking at all the time, but you don't see it because you've been given the wrong frame. See, if you've been given the frame, boys and girls, this is a democracy. Everybody is equal. It has an equal chance. The computer won't see it. I can assure you. But you have a chance of seeing it once you decode this is a system, global system of white supremacy, white genetic survival that is operative in economics, education, entertainment, ball games and sports, etc., labor law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Well, I don't want to prolong this. The two series of ball games in the white supremacy system and culture are big brown and small white. Small white what? All. And decode it. The two series of ball games, big brown, small white. What are big brown? Football, basketball, And the culture says what? Keep your eyes what? Is that right? Now, what ball games are played by the men that are considered to be most virile? Right. I mean, the football player, isn't he supposed to be the most virile man on campus? I think we're on the same planet, I said. Football and basketball, the men who play with these big round balls. This same culture, not a culture created by Francis Welsing. The same culture says what? That the white female's ideal mate is who? Dark and handsome. See, I don't make up things, but I learn to listen. What is the culture saying? What is the culture saying on a daily basis about itself? You see, while there's this preoccupation that Willie Horton wants to rape a white female, and that's how the Republicans got elected, the same culture, the white female is saying my ideal mate is tall, dark, and handsome. So at these two games where they're playing with the biggest brown ball, we see something very interesting. And I hope everybody is mature and grown up. And this is not X-rated, but it is advanced science. The football, this brown ball goes into the white upright legs at the end of the field, and the basketball goes into the white net. See, what I'm doing is helping us look at how the dynamics and the fundamental concern of the culture is being carried out, because this has a devastating effect on black people. An absolutely devastating effect on black people. The fact that this dynamic is going on and nobody talks about it. But it is going on at a subterranean, subconscious level, determining events on a 24-hour-a-day basis, 60 minutes of every hour, 60 seconds of every minute. Because it is a survival dynamic. And so, indeed, this is what's happening. And dancing alongside, jumping up and down with short skirts are white ladies. Am I right or wrong? You're right. Okay. Now, let's look on the other side of the board. A white gentleman told me, Dr. Wilson, did you know that white men say you're not a man until you've had sexual intercourse with a black lady? I didn't know that. But look at the game. What is the game that is played by the most powerful white males in the white supremacy system? Golf. So let's look at, we talk about where the big talked about where these big brown balls are going. And now we look over here and see where the little white ball is going and how it gets there. See, long stick held between legs. Is that correct? classmate to me. You see, we can go further. See, it's like you open that whole back wall over there, you just pull it apart. Oh, this is what's going on here. Oh. And then everything fits, like putting pieces in a puzzle, not where you jam them in, but where they fit smoothly. So we talked about, see, this is a discussion about male genitalia. Why is the male so critical? See, why is it the male that is so critical versus the black or other non-white female? Now, I know this is the era women's live, et cetera, but people of color in general are the target of attack of white supremacy or white genetic survival, but it zeroes in on black people more than the other colors of people. Black, stay back, brown, stick around, yellow, white, why? Because this is the gradation going down of the genetic ability to produce pigmentation. Black is the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation, brown lesser, red lesser, yellow lesser, etc. So these produce a decreasing threat to white genetic survival, so yellow can get in before brown and brown before black. Okay, but in addition to that, the male, why is the male so critical? I say more critical than the female. That's why in the institutes of higher learning at this point in time, we have more black females going to college, going to graduate school than black males. It is a reason tied to what it is that we're talking about. The reason, class, and this is Physiology 101, males, whether they're white, black, brown, red, or yellow, can impose sexual intercourse. Are you with me, class? Is there any lady who thinks she can impose sexual intercourse? Yeah, I didn't say entice. The ladies can dress up, get some nice perfume, etc., and thereby influence. But you cannot, ladies, force a man. Like if I said, I'm going to scan the room and select a gentleman of my